back, Steve.
Thank you. Good to be back.
All right, we will get started. I will call to order this Ordinance Review Committee meeting. We're gonna start with attendance or roll call because now that we don't have a secretary, they've asked that we just start every meeting by name and go all the way down just so that we know who's here and if we
Roger Graham.
Dave Alves. Eric Green.
Peg McDonald.
Steve Marola.
George Cheney.
Matthew Russ.
So we are here and we have quorum and we'll do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, guys. So I sent y'all the agenda. Most of these things are talking points only. So that'll be quick, but we are gonna spend some time on that, section 10.19. So from the top, we'll start with the old business of the data from SMPDC. I just wanted to let you all know that just day before yesterday, I believe it was, Michelle, Chair of the Comprehensive Plan Committee, received back the data from SMPDC with some of the talking points that Michaela had promised us she would do in that meeting when she came. So I've been going back with Michaela, back and forth a little bit. And basically, what's gonna happen on comprehensive plan, I wanna make sure everybody has a good idea of the process and how this is gonna go. She put the talking points in here. She's gonna come back to another meeting and we'll probably talk about those points that she put into this data package. And from there, at some point along the way in comprehensive plan, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up with a future, what they call a future land use map. And basically that takes a bunch of this data and we look and we say, okay, this area of the town would be good for this and this area of the town would be good for that, so on and so forth. That map will then drive the zoning ordinance. Whether we're most likely going to change zoning. We most likely will, we're most likely going to have to because of some of the changes coming down from the state, mandated or otherwise. So we really need that information from comprehensive plan before we can even consider changing zone or looking at our zoning map, adding zones, whatever. We have to have that. But what we have to do, we know now, and I brought this up at the last meeting. We haven't had a meeting since I found this out. But Lindsay submitted a bill to the state of Maine to try to be reimbursed for the work that Ordinance Review Committee has done on our zoning ordinance to be compliant with LD 2003. They came back to us and said, nope, we can't reimburse you because your zoning ordinance is still not compliant with LD 2003. Now, our understanding originally was that we had to only comply with the ADU portion of LD 2003 because we do not have town water or town sewer. The woman from the state, Hillary is her name, Maine Housing, has come back to us and said that is not the case. We, in Lyman, have a comprehensive plan, and in our zoning ordinance, we allow multifamily dwellings with a comparable wastewater system. Therefore, we have to comply with all the parts of LD 2003, basically. We didn't know that. So that's what we have to do. We have to come up with a draft ordinance fixing that section that I told you on the agenda, 10.19, which is multifamily. And the big thing about that, section 10.19, is that for 2 dwelling units in this town on one piece of land, you have to have half again as much frontage. That requirement cannot be in there. That has to be removed per LD 2003. We're gonna have to work through that ordinance, that section of the ordinance, because it's not as simple as removing that. We have to really think about it and talk about it. So that's what we're gonna do.
So just to clarify, the road frontage
Correct.
requirement
Yep.
needs to be removed?
The road, half again as much road frontage. So right now, for instance, a 5-acre lot, if you wanted to put another dwelling unit on that lot, a single family residence, not talking ADU, ADUs are done. If you want to put another dwelling unit on a 5-acre lot, you have to have 10 acres and half again as much frontage. So 375 is the road frontage requirement in general purpose zone. So half of 375 is,
Plus what, 1.5
Right.
times.
right.
Yeah.
So
And the 10 acres still remains in
the
effect?
10 acres remains, but that's really what we have to go through. There's a lot to it, and I wish it was just as simple as that, but I've done a lot of research on it, and I've looked at our other towns, so on and so forth. We have basically 6 neighboring towns, or shall I say 6 towns that touch our boundaries. And we're kind of dinosaurs. So we really got to work through it. But back to the agenda, looking at the agenda that I had sent out to you guys, that data from SMPDC, we haven't heard back from Michaela. I think we all had decided that we're gonna either perhaps be welcomed to that comprehensive plan meeting when Michaela comes back. We don't know when that is yet, but as soon as I know, I'll let you guys know. You don't have to attend, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to as well. So I'll send you all an email and let you know when that's gonna happen. Go ahead, Steve.
Just touching again on what you said on 10.19.
Mhm.
Any changes to the ordinance? Does it have to wait 2 years for another
It
election?
does.
Or would the selectmen be required to do it as an emergency because we need to be compliant?
So the problem with an emergency ordinance is that it's only good for 90 days.
Okay,
So the state has agreed that they will pay us back and they will allow us to be reimbursed for this time that we're working on this, as long as we have a draft ordinance.
okay.
So the draft needs to be done. Lindsay and I spoke about it about April. It has to be done. So that way she can get it over to legal, and the drop deadline for main housing is June of 2025. So as long as we have that draft to them by June of 2025, we will get reimbursed
Okay, even though it won't go in front of the voters.
until 2026. They're aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's no
Yeah.
penalty for that.
Correct. Yep. So next was the map article. I just wanted to clarify a little bit from our public hearing about the map article. There seemed to be some issues. Somebody took issue with the fact that on the warrant, the date was not accurate. I've dug into that a little bit, and I have a list here in the front of my ordinance that I was given probably 2 years ago. And it looks to me, I actually did find that date, the June 1st of 2010 date, I did find that. But it looks like it's been about 25 other times that this has changed. And that's the problem. is that the dates on that map are different from the dates on this map, from your map, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, the map has the tax overlay. I'm standing by the map. I think it's a great map. It's an upgrade, and it's good enough to get us into the next change. Go ahead, Dave.
Is the wording on it, does it specifically say the date of the map that was used to create?
So I have the warrant here. Okay, let's see.
So this says last revised was 1/28/05.
This one says, the Article 6 says, shall the town of Lyman zoning map adopted June 1 of 2010? Is what the warrant says. And that was the one that they took heat with. But
Chief, what's the map? What's the date on that one?
that one is February 14th, was it 2000?
2/6/14.
That's the issue, there's several different
Yes,
dates.
exactly.
So where is?
What's the
that
warrant date?
We don't know. We don't know which one is
The
which.
map
How did we get
of
the
the
date?
warrant is 2000.
How did this date come up?
I can only assume that it came from
2010.
this list. And all the ones that I've highlighted in yellow here
Yep.
are the changes. And unfortunately, I think it was just bad writing, perhaps. But this list that I have here, I have two lists. I got this one from our town manager and I got this one from our CEO. This was when I first started on Ordinance Review Committee. And these are supposedly all changes that were made to our zoning ordinance. And they're different.
So we gotta start somewhere.
Right.
So this is where we're starting.
So I just wanted to clear that up and we can move on from that now.
Does it really matter? Since the
I don't
tax
think it does.
overlay matters?
The
It's gonna
tax
be part
overlay
of
is
it.
on there.
It really doesn't matter.
It's only a guide anyway.
It is.
You're not gonna use that to
It is.
survey your land.
This one's dated 1/28/05 on the,
Yeah, that's the one I have.
yeah.
The next item on the agenda was budget. I just wanted to let you guys know that I have been asked by the treasurer to submit a budget for us, for Ordinance Review Committee. I did do a request today to Jeanette, and I copied Lindsay, and I asked for $23,000 for the 25-26 fiscal year for Ordinance Review Committee, and that number came directly from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. Michaela Jordan, I reached out to her and asked her what it was gonna cost us. And she sent back, and comprehensive plan is gonna be $20,000 to $25,000 for a full zoning ordinance update with facilitated meetings, mapping, public workshops, and drafting. She estimated us between $10,000 and $15,000, which I actually was surprised. I thought that
Seems
was,
cheap.
it seems lower than I
Yeah.
expected it, to be honest. I thought it was gonna be more than
I'm sure they
comprehensive
have a
plan.
good template already in place.
Yes. And then another 3,000 for the shoreland ordinance. I asked for 23, and that 5,000 buffer is basically just for our copies, our legal, and any meeting notices that we have to send out. So that went off to the treasurer today, and we'll see what happens.
The
Great if we got
comprehensive
it.
plan was 5?
25.
So do we have?
So how do you, what did you say the total?
For ordinance review committee, the total that I requested was 23.
Right, so the numbers don't add up, so how do you get to 23?
We had 15, she said 10 to 15 So I went on the high end, 15 for the zoning ordinance, and then 3,000 for shoreland,
Yeah.
which brings it to 18. The
Mhm.
shoreland is us as well.
Yeah,
Ordinance Review Committee did their own budget and requested 25,000. I am requesting for Ordinance Review Committee 18,000, which is 15 for LZO, 3 for shoreland, and then that 5,000 extra is for our files, copies, legal, all that.
okay. So the comp's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, comp's different budget. And then I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, just throwing out this the last item, going out of order here, the last item on I wanna get that out of the way before we go to 1019. I put on their rent control on the agenda. And the only reason that I put that on there is because there's been some residents coming in and asking if there is something Ordinance Review Committee could do about that. And I've done my own research. I think it is a hot bucket of liability for our town, as far as I can say. And anybody that wants to throw something in, if they've read anything about it or want to talk about it, you're welcome to. But I think it's a very hot button topic that opens us
I
up.
don't think we have the authority.
I don't.
The only two towns I found that have any is Portland and South Portland.
Yeah.
And
Especially
I
as
didn't
it
go any
pertains.
deeper than that, but those are the two big towns around here.
There's one in Old Orchard Beach that apparently is coming up. This is as it pertains to mobile home parks, because the people that were coming in asking about it are Kiwi people. There was, I had to look at this statistic online because in the listings, just because I have access to it. And I discovered that between Lyman and Alfred, there was, I think it was 27 properties listed between Lyman and Alfred, and 19 of them were trailers in Keywood. And that's because of the lot rent.
They're
Oh,
paying
it's a lot.
$650 a month.
The lot rent is going up so much that, and those are the people coming in saying, can you do any kind of rent control thing and da-da-da. But I really just don't think that anything Ordinance Review Committee can do,
It's-
unfortunately. So,
You get what you pay for. I mean, the first place we go is 1,300, the second place we go is 1,800 for the month. It's just depends on what you want.
I guess my only 2 cents would be, what's the town attorney's feeling?
that's a good question. I think that my guess, from what I understand, that he would not be in favor of it, but I'm more than willing to reach out and ask that question for sure.
If he would put a hard no to it, then I think that's our answer.
Yeah, that's our answer for sure. I'll make a note to reach out to, have Lindsay reach out to her on that.
Would it just be for trailer parks? Or would it be-
They're asking for trailer parks, but we don't really have a lot of rentals. I mean, yeah, we have short-term rentals, and that's a topic for another time, but, I mean, I think something's gonna have to be done there, but we can't really control rent on short-term rentals especially. I know that.
No, it would be more on a living situation.
Yes, exactly. For sure. All right, anybody else on that topic, or do we get ready to move on? All right, let's move on to section 10.19. And so 10.19 is multifamily dwelling units. And through this discussion, I'd like you guys to, I shouldn't say through, but maybe even first, we should have a little discussion about LD 2003 and make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of LD 2003. I'm gonna simplify it just to be sure that we're all on the same page. LD 2003 is basically broken down into 3 buckets, if you will. Affordable housing, multifamily, and ADU. Okay? Now, the affordable housing part of the bill is basically about density bonuses and so on and so forth. So basically, a contractor that wants to go to the state and say, I'm gonna grab some of that affordable housing money and build a bunch of affordable homes, that's what that section of the bill is for, okay?
Because that would give them 2.5 times.
They are allowed 2.5 times what the zoning ordinance says,
Says.
correct? So then you go into multifamily. That section of the bill is basically allows people to put more than 1 unit, 2 units on a lot, and then once you get to 3 or more, that triggers subdivision. Everybody's aware of that, correct? So, and then ADUs. Okay, ADUs is done, we don't have to worry about ADUs. So that brings us, the multifamily brings us to section 10.19. Yes,
I don't have a 10.19.
in your zoning ordinance.
Neither do I. Page
Oh,
50.
really?
Are you kidding me?
In the zoning ordinance,
You know,
Well, I
yeah.
have it in this.
What page are you guys on?
53 of 77.
I have 53 of 80.
Yeah,
Same
Here we go
here.
again with the document.
53 of 77
You
is
do
what I
not
have.
have-
53 of 80's got 10.19 multifamily dwelling units.
Well, we got the same page number, 53.
Different
we just
pages.
don't have the
I'm on
total
page
same
6 number.
Dave's on page
I'm on page
60.
60.
We're on 53. I don't want to know the difference. Okay, so does are you there, Buzz?
Books.
I don't know.
No, who
I don't know.
who did the,
Did you find it, Buzz?
Well, I'm trying to get up to page 60. I'm on 59, I'm doing good.
How you making out, George?
What
That
page am I
10
supposed to be on?
We're not sure which book you have. You're supposed to be
I'm
in
looking
section
at the
10.19.
Yeah. 10.19.
Yep, you got it. So you got the same page as me, 53 of 80. Okay, so
Sure.
section 10.19, that first section, 2-family dwelling unit area shall be equal to that required for an equivalent number of single-family units, and the road frontage shall exceed by 50% the requirements of a single-family dwelling unit. So, right out of the gate, that 50% requirement on the road frontage has to go. That's what we know, okay? What does not have to go, and I want to be very specific about this, towns are allowed to say, we require this much for 1 house, this much for 2 house, and so on. What we cannot do is say 5 acres for 1, 15 acres for 2. It has to be the exact same. So 5 acres for 1, 10 acres for 2, down the line, 15 acres for 3. You can do it that way, you just can't require more, okay? So right now, in order to be compliant, we would just have to take out that exceeds by 50% requirement. And we could leave,
Why do we have to take this out? Well,
LD.
we're in LD 2003, is that?
2003 says that we cannot require more road frontage. So I have the bill here. I don't have the section to quote, but I do have the bill here and I know it's there. And Hillary from the Maine State Housing Authority has
So,
reinforced
so
this.
having a LD 2003 guidance is not gonna have that in there.
It could have it in there, yes. I'm not sure what section it's on, residential areas, it should say here somewhere.
That's something about the land though, too.
Lot size, density, minimum lot coverage. You can't require water. Deed restrictions, lot sizes.
Lot area for dwelling unit,
What's that?
additional units may not
Yes.
require more land.
Right.
So they can't go from 5 to 10.
You can go from 5 to 10, but you can't go half again as much.
Additional units may not require more land area per unit than the first unit.
Then the first unit. So right now, we require 5.
Oh,
you-
I
so
see.
you have to have
Okay. Okay,
Another 5, you can't require 6.
okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
You can't require 6 for the second.
Now, you're talking general purpose only, right? Because residential.
Right now,
it's
yeah.
3,
Yeah, I'm just
and-
talking
right,
general
And then you
purpose.
would need 6.
Correct. So we don't have to, I personally feel that has to change. The requirement for double the acreage, I feel has to change. The reason I feel that is because I have looked at the other towns, and basically, every town that is around us allows 2 family dwelling units on one lot. Obviously, you have to meet setbacks, you have to be able to get a septic in there, all that stuff. That's a given,
Within one structure or 2 separate structures?
either or.
Either one. And then each one of those would be entitled to an ADU?
Well, that sends you over, this is part of the problem, this is why this is gonna be a big discussion. Because that sends you back over to section 6, is it? Where are we here? Yes, section 6, article 6, where it talks about the dimensional requirements. Dimensional requirements in 6.2.2, okay? This says that in a general purpose district, you can have as many buildings as you want, as long as you don't cover more than 20%, right? What's 20% of 5 acres? That's an acre.
20.
So basically, you can cover an entire acre with buildings. And you still got 4 acres to put plenty of septic in there, right? So think about that.
It's
I
a
have
40,000 square foot home.
No, well, 40,000 square feet, yes, is 1 acre, but how many buildings could you put in there? It doesn't have to be 1 building,
Yeah.
it could be many buildings.
Yeah.
So when you think of, when we're talking about 10.19, I want you guys to try to think of it this way. Right now, the way our ordinance is written, a contractor could go to the state and get one of these affordable housing density bonuses and could put up to 15 units on 1 5-acre lot. But we are not allowing our residents to put 2 unless they have 10 acres. That's the way this ordinance is written right now.
But you gotta remember, when this ordinance was written, Peggy, it was for growth. It was to slow the growth down.
I totally agree, but now we're faced with this, with LD 2003.
Yeah.
And making this compliant. And because of LD 2003, that's making multifamily, it could very easily become a town where developers look at this town and say, hey, look at that zoning ordinance. We can put 50 15 units
How could they put 15 units on 1.5?
because we can cover an entire acre with buildings.
But the zoning only allows for a primary residence. You can have,
Nope. Not here, not for multifamily.
But
See,
it says
10
two family dwellings. It doesn't
Right.
say 15 family dwellings.
It says two, for two family. 10.19.1 is talking about two family.
And then
10.19.2
says
is talking about multifamily.
no building shall contain more than 6 dwelling units.
Correct. So if they went through subdivision for 3 dwelling units and they had a density bonus and they're allowed up to 6 dwelling units in each unit, that's a lot. And they still have plenty of room for septic and setbacks. So this has to, I feel, be completely reworked.
So my ignorance, I'm sorry. Why hasn't it happened yet?
Why hasn't what happened yet?
A developer come in and put 15 lots on, 15 homes on an acre land.
Because
just-
not many people know about it.
Because not enough people know about it. And there's gonna be a time, right, when we don't know, we're not gonna be compliant. And this was what we were kind of talking about in comp plan. There's going to be a period of time where, what happens if this guy comes along? The town is just gonna, they're not gonna spend their money on legal knowing that the court's gonna go in favor of the state. I mean, there'll be a period where we're not compliant, everybody knows about it, and we're just not gonna spend money on legal fighting it. We're just gonna let it happen.
I guess I'm a little confused here because it says 3 or more, you have to meet the subdivision standards.
Mhm.
And would those apply to a 5-acre parcel?
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, it would.
Is there a mechanism at the state level that if somebody went there, they would inform the town?
That's a good question I don't know about. I can find that out through my contact at Maine Housing.
Trying to understand the way this is written, 2 family dwelling units. So they don't have to be separate, right?
Correct.
So it could be 2 townhomes. So you need to have 1.5 times the acreage to build 2 townhomes?
To build 2 homes, period. It doesn't make sense.
Well, to me, it would not.
It doesn't make sense.
Why would you need,
Well,
7.5
it
acres?
especially doesn't
No,
make
you need
sense.
10 acres.
You'd need 10 acres.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was reading another one that
Yeah,
says
yeah.
1.5 times. That's why ours is 2 times.
It just doesn't make sense to not allow our residents to have 2 family units, 2 single-family units.
Well, again, a duplex
one lot.
is, yeah, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
good use of
Attached or
a smaller
detached,
space
doesn't matter.
to,
I'm sorry, so right now, what you're talking about right now could not happen in town unless they went to the state and got some of the affordable money under LB 2003.
Well, it doesn't matter if they got that or not. They wouldn't get the density bonus of 2.5 times perhaps.
Which
But-
then wouldn't allow 15 units on an acre.
It would not, but they would still be allowed 3 units or more up to 20% coverage. Whether they had a density bonus or not, they could cover 20%, an entire
So-
acre.
But there's gotta be, well, I shouldn't say there's gotta be. I'm thinking there's something in that law that says it still has to comply with the town's ordinance. They can't do.
It definitely does. It does, but it would
Setbacks.
comply, is what I'm saying. Because multifamily, right here, it says 3 or more dwelling units. So if I wanted to put 4 units on a 5-acre lot. I could go through subdivision, and each of those units could have 6 dwelling units in them.
But if you were gonna put 4 units on a 5-acre lot, wouldn't you need 20 acres?
No, that's only for 2-family. 10.19.2 is multifamily. Those are 2 separate things. 10.19.1 is 2-family. Multifamily is 3 or more units.
I always thought we got stuck with cluster development when we got into this
Right.
multifamily. And that meant that you
There's
had to
not-
have the acreage
Yep.
to the
there's-
tune of whatever the lot size requirement for the zone.
That's in here too.
Where were the subdivision
It- it-
standards that they're talking about?
Here,
Well, so
subdivision is planning board. They're the ones that do this one.
We don't have copies of them.
I only have one, just because we don't.
Could you request copies?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to Lindsay and ask her for that.
It just doesn't seem, because I always thought, as George did, when you have a cluster development, yes, you can group the homes, but.
You gotta have the land.
You gotta have the land to support that. So if it was in general purpose and the cluster was 6, you'd need 30 acres.
Right.
Yeah, but nothing forces them to cluster in the zoning ordinance.
well,
It goes to subdivision, but that doesn't mean you apply to
I
subdivision.
can assure you the town code enforcement
Yeah, I
officer
think we need
made
to
that clear.
look at that
Right.
subdivision.
I guess I'm on the same
I-
Yeah, I don't think.
page
it
as
can be
you guys,
done.
but probably in a different book.
It really just goes back to lot coverage. Lindsay and I hashed this out 8 ways to Sunday yesterday. And basically, that's what we came back to, is that because of this ordinance does not say that from multifamily, it's only 2-family that you need double the acreage and half again as much frontage.
I do agree with you. That's not how it's worded. here
Right.
anyways.
Multifamily, you do not need half again as much road frontage, nor do you need double the acreage. Unfortunately, that's not the way it's written.
Well, I mean, it clearly says the subdivisions.
Right, you gotta follow the subdivision.
Subdivision.
which-
Right, it ships you to planning board, for sure.
Okay.
And then if you, there's nothing saying that if somebody wanted to come in and do a subdivision, you don't have to cluster it. Nothing in planning board makes you cluster. You can do a subdivision of however many you want without having to have that other acreage out back, if you will.
The main reason they cluster is for infrastructure costs.
Right.
Building roads and whatnot. Right. You don't have to cluster,
Mm-mm.
but then your homes are gonna be spread out on your 30 acres versus
Yep.
clustering. So it's still the same land, whether they cluster, in the same amount of dwelling units, whether you cluster or not.
Correct.
Whether it's saving money on the road.
Get very
Yeah,
far.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In the sprinkler system.
With
We need a copy.
disaster.
So, yeah. Yeah,
Should I look at that copy
sure.
of the planning board?
Subdivision, yeah. So, on your agenda, I attached for you guys, where did I put it there? I did it. This is, I gave you guys copies of Arundel's. I had a printout because Arundel's zoning ordinance, first of all, Arundel is very close to us, they border us, and they have about the same population as us. And they had one of those sexy regional planners do their zoning ordinance, so we know it's actually done right, correct? But I put in the way that, Arundel has done their land use districts. And I think that this is kind of what we need to look at doing for us. It's got these dimensional requirements, and it's basically a table for each one of the districts, and it tells you the lot size. That lot size for 2-family, they require another half acre, so in a 1 acre zone, they require half again. So 1.5 acres in a 1 acre zone. It goes on down through the table and it tells you the setbacks from the high water mark, which we don't have a lot of that. And the building height, agricultural buildings, silos, so on and so forth. And then basically it goes on and it just tells you, these are the permitted uses and these are the conditional uses. They don't have the table like we have. They say, this is allowed in this district. And if it's not here, go to planning board, get a conditional use. And that makes it so super simple. I'm kind of losing you guys, I can tell. This is the problem, guys. It makes your head spin. I know, but I've spent so much time on this.
But just to bring us back to our own ordinance, I think we need to have copies of the subdivision standards in front of us
What
to
it
tell us.
says in there, if you're gonna do a subdivision, then you have to refer back to 6.2, which states,
20%.
well, no, in there, the 6.2 is saying that in residential, you need 3 acres per,
6.2.2 is,
and then in general purpose, you need 5 acres.
and it says maximum lot coverage of 20%.
I don't think that means though with habitable dwellings. I think that's, in general, you can't have more than 20% non-vegetated is what they call it, which I don't understand because if it's not covered by asphalt or concrete, it will permeate water. And I have areas where there's just no vegetation. I don't think that
Put
could
it
be
this way,
considered coverage,
it says-
but
It actually says that though. It says maximum lot coverage for buildings. It actually says that in 6.2.2. Is maximum lot coverage for buildings, 20%.
Steve, where are you getting referred to 6.2?
Yeah, we're,
In the subdivision.
in the subdivision, I looked at Peggy's subdivision.
It's, okay, it says goes.
And it
Yeah.
says to go back to that, but
I don't think it means though that you can put more than one building. I think it means you can have a building that can cover up to 20, or maybe outbuildings. But I don't know if it says you can have 5 buildings in that 20% area. Because it wouldn't meet the
put
zoning
it this way.
requirements.
Our last code enforcement officer, this was before LD 2003 and multifamily was even an issue. Our last code enforcement officer saw this as a problem a mile away. When I first started ordinance review committee, she said, this is a huge problem because somebody can come in and put as many buildings as they want on a 5 acre lot as long as it doesn't cover more than 20%.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with
who are
that.
you talking about, Patty or Brenda?
I think in many towns, they have a maximum lot coverage on a lot.
Mhm.
And that's to prevent stormwater runoff and things like that. But it doesn't mean you can put more than what the town allows for buildings on that lot. If it says you can build one single family unit, this is an example, on the lot, and the ordinance says you can have buildings, 20%, doesn't mean you can build more than that one building. Your building coverage cannot be more than 20% of the lot.
But
So
why-
ours is 5 acres, just for example, so that's 1 acre.
Mhm.
But most towns, it's, you know,
But
what,
why
half
can't-
an acre, so.
but there's nothing
They can
here.
only put 20% on that, you know, however their town may read. They can't.
But there isn't something, there isn't something in this zoning ordinance that says you can only have 3 buildings, 4 buildings, 5 buildings.
What is
There's
the,
nothing.
Yeah, there is in residential.
But-
Because I'm only
what is
allowed
the,
2
what
buildings
is
in
the
residential.
subdivision? So if we go back to 10.19,
Mm-hmm.
in the 2-family dwelling units, right?
Two-family, yep.
You have to have 10 acres to be able to put 2 buildings on, it, right?
Yep.
What does the subdivision standards say about that?
It does not. It refers you back to 6.2, which gives you 20% lot coverage on buildings.
There's nothing in subdivision that says you
Not
have to
that I
have
found.
20
That-
acres
and
to
that's-
have 4 homes.
Yeah, that's exactly what Lindsay and I were talking about. You're kind of like, you know, that's the problem with our zoning ordinance and all of our documents, really. They just kind of go back and forth. This refers back to this, refers back to this, refers back to this. So the zoning ordinance, this says for multifamily, go to this. This says, go back to 6.2, which says maximum lot coverage for buildings, 20%.
Right, we just went through this with the subdivision that's going up off the Brock Road. And they
But
talked
that's a
about,
cluster.
it doesn't matter, they still talked about you can only have X amount of buildings because you only have X amount
X
of
amount of
acres.
acreage.
Right, because you have to have, for a cluster, you have to have that percentage amount of free space for a cluster.
Right, but I think it was something like 40 acres. Which on subdivision, I
Cluster,
think your acreage lot goes down to 1, so you have
Mhm.
10.
Mhm,
Just add in 1 single family unit
mhm.
and an ADU.
Would it be
And
possible
20% coverage.
to have a
Whatever you want with the
representative
buildings.
that is spending a lot of time about this? It just doesn't
Seems like
seem right.
it's easy.
Would the planning board have the
I
answer?
don't think
Would
it's
it be
all.
possible to have a
It's not easy.
representative of the
Where-
planning? board?
Where's Don when we need him?
Yeah, because I just know that Brenda had visited a neighbor that simply wanted to put a shed roof off his existing shed, and she said, you gotta calculate the coverage. I just, even though the wordage may be there, I was under the impression that what the intention was, a primary structure, possible ADU, and you could have unlimited accessory buildings as long as your total coverage of the lot, including driveways and other places, doesn't exceed 20%, or 15% if you're in the residential. I don't think the intention was that you could have unlimited dwelling buildings.
It's written somewhere that you can have up to 6.
Right.
Buildings.
Right.
Outbuildings.
I thought that went away, David,
Oh, I think.
with the change, and now you're at a 20% lot coverage, which is a
With
combination of,
our change,
yes,
uh,
in,
not unless
from
it,
the last
not unless it
chart.
happened, not unless it happened within the past 2.5 years.
Well,
And I'm not aware of that.
In 10.19.2, it says, no building shall contain more than 6 dwelling units. I don't know if
Right.
That's what you're talking about, but that's an apartment building, you can only have 6 apartments in one building.
And
Right.
the other thing is, I think they consider if vegetation can't grow on something, they consider that impervious.
Who determines whether I mean,
It's
if someone
in
chose,
the ordinance somewhere.
okay, so, but I mean, if you threw down a handful of grass seed and it sprouted, then I guess, then you're good. I mean, there were just some areas, footpaths, other stuff where vegetation doesn't grow, but it will permeate water.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's heavy-handed.
So by what you're saying though, because under residential, it also has that same statement, but just
Right.
15%.
Correct.
So you're saying someone who has a residential lot size of 3 acres could put as many buildings as they wanted on that 15%?
As long as they don't go over 15% coverage.
But
With-
the ordinance only allows you one on 5 acres.
Yeah, but
I mean,
that's,
on 3 acres.
But that's for two-family dwellings.
that's going to the state.
Being that charge.
It's going to the state, getting your
And
determination.
That's what the C-
coming
Bonus.
back, going through subdivision.
Is this what
Well, this is
she-
just
is this what-
residential, in the residential district.
in the attachment
Right?
here?
It
Correct.
says maximum lot coverage for buildings 15%.
For the,
Mhm.
There's no way that I'm gonna be allowed to put 4 buildings on that 15% on my 3 acre lot.
Maybe
The town
not.
doesn't
because
allow
they
it.
keep talking
Where
about
does it say
section
that?
6.
I can only have one, I need 10 acres or double.
Yeah,
that.
I know.
I can put 2.
Yeah.
In our zoning,
Oh, well, this is residential.
Right, but two-family dwelling units
I
on
need a
any
cup of coffee.
residential or general purpose.
Okay.
This 10.19
Mhm.
says for 2. If you want 2, you have to double. In residential, you'd need 6, in general purpose, you'd need 10.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
for
right.
multi, which is 3 or more, multi, you have to go to subdivision, which is fine, because you go to subdivision, you
Right.
apply, and they say, hey, he's got 3 units here. Each unit can have, each building can have 6 units in it. So here we are at 18 units on a 3-acre lot. He's still under 15%.
Oh, wow.
See, I don't think.
Where does it
I don't
say
know.
that
I
he
just-
can't do
I-
that?
I guess the way I read it is
in
just, I don't see it that way.
6.3.1, it says in the residential district, one principal building along with
Yes.
accessory buildings per lot must meet the lot size, setback, and coverage, and then
Of 6.2.
requirements of 6.2.
Mhm.
So they're telling you right here that even though you can have multiple accessory buildings, you can only have one principal building. And then 6.3 B, it says in general purpose, one principal building along with accessory buildings, and then it refers you back to 6.2.
But
So-
then, going back to 10.9, says opposite of that. That you can have more than one, you just have to have double the acreage.
Right,
For 2.
And I believe that carries through, and this is where planning could help us, that, as Matt said, in that subdivision, you can cluster them for economies of the infrastructure, but you still have to have the available land as if they were individual units.
Peggy,
Yes.
the rule of thumb is the most restrictive one outweighs the other one.
The ambiguity, you're saying.
If one says you can have 10 of them, and one says, no, you can't,
Right.
you only have one.
And I'm
I
not saying
don't,
that,
I believe this doesn't say that, though. I think that's where we're different on the 6.2 dot 1. I think that's just telling you you can't put more than 15% of your property can't have, nothing more than that can have buildings on it.
correct,
Right.
that's correct.
Whether, right, but if the town only allows me 1 on that 15%, it doesn't allow me to put 4 more, that's what I'm saying.
But if you,
And
this
it would be the
says, in-
same, I think, in the general purpose. I think that is in there, just from my, and believe me, it's not a lot of knowledge,
so
minimal
this is
knowledge
what I
of it,
think.
is that it prevents you from having stormwater runoff issues and things like that. Because if I had a 3-acre lot and decided to tar it all, that would create stormwater issues, and maybe my neighbors and stuff like that. This prevents some of that from happening because you cannot put more on that property. So it just limits you where you can put your buildings, 20%.
Mhm.
It
Yes,
doesn't say you can have more than one building.
More than one primary.
but you can go through
What's
subdivision.
a primary?
and get that.
resident.
Well, if the town approves it,
What's
if
a
it meets
dwelling?
everything, then the
That's
town
what they
approves
refer
it.
to.
Correct.
Yeah, that's why you go through that
And then-
process.
Correct,
Making sure-
absolutely, and that's what 10.19 would
So
say.
our task is to
No matter
clarify.
how big your lot was, George.
Absolutely,
you could have
and
one
that's what I'm
family.
saying,
I
is
think we
that
just
we
asked the
have to.
attorney
You
that
were
question,
limited to
what
three
does the
uphill.
D mean on
So,
6.2?
like,
dot one.
250
And I think if he says
lot
that just
where he
means
wanted to put
you can only
a bunch
have
of garages,
buildings covering that much of your
that's
lot,
how he got stopped.
and it doesn't mean you can have additional buildings.
Charter.
I think it's
That
pretty
ordinance
clear,
was
just,
changed. So
or just
instead
take
of
the
limiting
yes, or take the buildings out of it,
Three
maximum lot
outdoors.
coverage 20%.
they limited
But
the
we're
lot
just
coverage.
dealing with 10.19
Right.
right now.
Right,
For
but you said it
multifamily
goes back to
dwellings.
this. and
To
they
get
all
it
connect.
compliant with 2003.
You can only have one principal.
In order to
So-
do that, we have to
just
take away that
this whole
frontage requirement. You know
multifamily,
that.
to me, is like
But we can't,
a complete.
we have to decide, are we going to remove
Either you can have more than
10
one
acre
principal or you
requirement for two
For
lots?
multi-
Let's start with that.
Well,
in those
is there a way,
And then in the subdivision,
I mean,
You still
obviously
have
that's
to
a
meet
better scenario than somebody
the lot
saying,
requirement,
we put 50
individual,
units,
so it's.
you know. Is there a way of de-incentivizing the state allowance to do that and allow something of that nature so that somebody would, it's more likely they migrate that way than to do something foolish as a 15 unit?
Well,
I'm just throwing that out.
I think it's two different things. I think my issue that I take with 10.19 is that we're talking two different things. Anybody that comes and wants to put in a subdivision is really, that's gonna happen however we make this ordinance. It doesn't matter. We gotta try to do the best we can with this ordinance and make it so that it doesn't turn into Westbrook or Scarborough or whatever like that, because that's clearly not what our town wants. However, two-family dwelling units, we're talking about our residents. We're talking about people being able to put another family dwelling unit on their lot. The spirit of LD 2003 is to create housing for firefighters, for the restaurant workers, for so on and so forth. And the spirit of this is to allow two-family dwelling units. Now, I've looked at our 6 neighboring towns. All of them have allowed two-family dwelling units on one lot. Obviously, you have to meet all the requirements of the zoning ordinance, otherwise you have to have the septic, so on and so forth. But 10 acres, considering over half of our town, 3/4 of our town is 5-acre zoning. To say to everybody that you have to have 10 acres for 2 lots, for 2 houses, I feel is too much.
But won't the people come back and say, if we're allowing two full-size dwellings, are we then allowing 2 ADUs? So now there would be 4 units.
Only if you can meet the requirements of the law.
Is that the way it's
Okay.
written though? Is it an ADU per unit or is it an ADU per residence?
Residents.
So if you've got 2 residences, you have 2 ADUs. And the only thing that interferes with 4 units on that lot is setbacks. Obviously, you have to have the septic for it, but it's just setback. So that's the possibility. But you're still talking about a lot of costs for construction that I don't think people are going to do. So all basically this is allowing is you can have a bigger residence than going with an ADU, which is limited to 800 square feet if our change passes. And obviously, there's no limit to the size of the house with this.
Right, like building a duplex, yeah.
Right.
I mean, that,
So
to me, that's the most common thing that I could come up with that makes sense, would be people building duplexes, whether it's sort of like an ADU, maybe for an aging family member, or maybe someone who needs assistance, you know, but still you all want your privacy,
Well, I mean,
things like
and
that.
2 units on a, so it's just not, I see what Peggy's saying, it's not offensive. I mean, where your mother-in-law is, his 2 basically residences, they don't detract from the neighborhood. And why would you have to have 10 acres? I understand what you're going with this, and I agree. I think, and I'm gonna take a lot of flack from a lot of people, but I think the lot size requirement line is just too big.
I agree.
I mean, if you're looking for growth, it's too big.
And I agree, I think that, I think a lot of us feel that way, that has to change. But again, that has to come from comp, we have to get that
Right.
future land
No.
use map,
Yep.
trickle on down,
Absolutely.
down to us, so on and so forth. But that's a ways away.
So to throw a proposal out there, and then maybe we can bat that around for a few moments. Strike the 50% road frontage, clearly, in 10.19.1. But in 10.19.2, add the same verbiage that you have to have double the acreage to clarify that if you're gonna put 3 homes, you now have to have 50 acres.
Okay.
And then when we get things back from comp, like you just said, then we can decide, maybe Lyman becomes 3 acres everywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe we go to half the extra and we go from needing 10 acres for 2 units to 7.5 acres for having 2 units. But without
Yeah.
that guidance from comp, and to get our draft in to make us compliant and get our funding, I think we just clarify it by striking that and adding the same verbiage in 10.19.2.
But how does it make it fair that multifamily can happen on a smaller lot than a 2-family?
I'm saying you need 15 acres to have
3.
multifamily. That, the 3.
Now, Peggy, when
5
you
acres for
strike
every
the
builder.
50%,
I'm just trying not to
in that same section,
propose
say
really a
that the
change.
land requirement-
Trying to just get it clarified, get something in writing, that when we get the guidance back,
And that cuts through all this gray stuff here.
we can really change our ordinance and say,
I think
we're gonna have more zones, and you say, because you're gonna be 3, and then
Because I agree with you.
cut something down.
What, I mean, what you're really saying is it's gonna depend on the zone, whether it's residential, 3 acres,
General
all purpose with 5.
We had a lot of
And-
private conversations during your case.
Any
They're talking here, you guys are talking there.
No, what we were just saying, Buzzy, that if you look at the history of certain things, allowing multifamilies, a duplex doesn't detract, there's certainly more than enough room on 5 acres, but the possibility is that way back when these ordinances was created, the people that were creating were just totally against any growth.
It was growth. It was a growth ordinance that we set in, Steve. And at one time, they were getting hit with 100, 200, 300 permits a year. And they said, wait a minute, we're growing too fast. So they went to 5 acres, 3 acres, and stopped all the little developments from happening. And it's just, we've just never changed it. It needs to be changed now. It needs to, the acreage needs to come down.
Now, that
But what
5
we're saying
acres,
the other night,
that's been a
I
good
think
while.
we've all gone off in base because we're looking at multifamily and we need to eliminate the 50% more road frontage to become compliant.
Right.
And is that what we're gonna do? We're talking about everything else.
No, we're talking about trying to be compliant with the multifamily dwelling.
Well,
And if we're just gonna do that now and wait 2 years because it's gotta go up for a vote. It does, I would have made sense to not do the whole.
Well,
thing.
it doesn't, and
Well-
this is part of, go ahead, Matt.
We're really only creating a draft.
Right.
It's just a draft.
But it's a draft that's going to the state that they're gonna approve to give us money back, right?
So we just have to have a draft that's compliant. Now, I'm not saying we should not put our
If-
effort in
If
and
it's
do it
not voted,
do it mostly the right way, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be voted on. It's not going to change what happens in town. It's a draft to get us some funds.
And to satisfy that, all we have to do is strike the 50%.
yes.
That's all we have to do.
That's all we have to do is change.
So
get
why
rid of
don't
that.
we
I would
create
say
the
let's get rid
draft
of that and make us
by
compliant.
just striking the
so we can get paid.
50% and move
Yeah.
on?
Get paid, because the next the budget money that I requested is going to be, what is it, July of 25 of next year. So the draft will go in so that we can get paid back in June. Hopefully our budget money comes in July, and we'll have to be done by April of 26, so that we can get legal done and so on and so forth. So basically, you're right, it's just a draft.
And if all goes right, we have a nice proposal from Southern Maine Regional Planning and Development
That goes
that takes care
Here.
of all of the things we just talked about.
here, vote on this whole thing, because if we break it down, it's gonna be just like charter, right? It's gonna have to be
Like
charter.
pulling teeth.
We're gonna say, do you approve this new zoning ordinance or not? It's gonna have to be a complete revamp. We're not gonna be able to do separate articles. It is a lot of work, but hopefully the $18,000 will go a long way towards SMPDC helping us do that.
Right.
I actually sat down, guys, I looked at our towns on page 5 of our zoning ordinance, that's the establishment of districts. Everybody knows we have 3 districts in this town. Dayton has 9. Dayton was historically like archaic. They have 9 zoning districts. Arundel has 11, Alfred has 15, Waterboro has 7, Kennybunk has 27, and Hollis has 11. We have 3. 3!
There's no doubt you need different areas for business.
It's definitely gonna be an exciting change, but I think you're on the right track with comp and getting all the research
It's
done
gonna
and writing
go
our plan.
Just like that,
And-
absolutely.
So
So I
guess
agree, I think that we need to just remove that
Do the draft,
50%,
get
do
paid.
the draft, get paid, and then that
And
draft
then we
can
can work
change.
on it after.
We don't have to send that draft to the voters. It can all change and will change.
Tonight, we've gone, I
And the
think,
state
off the
doesn't
track
care
of, do
if
we
it
get rid of this
They
or
don't
not?
care,
And what if it's not compliant?
because they know that we
Yeah.
can't vote on it
Yeah, really
until
wouldn't vote.
26.
Well, I guess that's all I'm trying to, right, they won't give us money because we haven't changed it. So we're gonna give them something and say, this is what we're changing, and
Yes.
then we're gonna change that afterwards.
Yes, because they
Before
know
we
that the
actually-
whole
But-
ordinance has to be changed.
Well, no,
But at the end of the day, as long as we're compliant,
but we can't renege on
we
the
use the law.
striking the 50%.
Right.
That's,
Right,
but we
right.
can
We
change.
can't add that
Because they're
back.
checking to make sure we're compliant. That's
There you
all they're doing. And that's
our,
the only,
our,
I
that's
think
the
that's a
only
beautiful
piece that
idea.
takes us
I
out
would
of
say, yeah,
compliance.
let's just
our,
remove.
our
Why can't we-
intent is to
why
be
can't-
compliant. Unfortunately, our charter doesn't allow us to vote on this today, but our intent is,
Yeah.
the next time we can vote on it, we're going to present something to the voters that complies with your
In a
your
perfect
legislation.
world, we could do a special election and get this voted and out of the way, but that can't happen. Zoning ordinances have to go to the voters and it has to go on the gubernatorial. So we're stuck. Let's just do the draft, get it in, wait for our next budget and kill it. Go ahead, George.
I'd love to include what Matt said on the multifamily, except would that be a red flag to us getting the state money because suddenly we're creating a restriction?
No, I actually asked Hillary from the Maine Housing Department about that, and she said that that was actually fine.
We
So-
could add that in.
No, the ordinance is fine, we are compliant with that multifamily the way it is right now. It's just that,
But even adding it tonight, George, It won't be voted on.
Yeah,
I know.
So he's saying we're gonna change it again
Right.
anyways
Right.
after we send it to the
Correct.
state. So
correct.
the way we have the time to work on it
Mhm.
and make it for our town or using as the Southern Maine planning.
Yep.
And then as long as it's compliant, then everybody's fine.
I agree. So that is settled then. I think that's exactly what we do. I think that's a good idea. I will work on that draft and I will bring it to the next meeting. And you guys can all look at it. We'll vote on it and ship it off to Lindsay. As far as the next meeting, like I said, I don't know when that's gonna be. If he'll, Michaela comes back and says, let's do a meeting with comp, I'll let you guys know. If you want to attend, that's great.
Well, we have a joint meeting next Thursday, right?
Nope.
I
No,
thought you sent me an
you
email
said,
on that.
no, that was a blast, and I think that they made the subject line, they didn't change it.
Okay, so there is no
Yeah,
joint
there is
meeting.
no
Okay,
joint.
because I saw that, I said, geez, I
No,
didn't have that in my calendar.
No, I think they just didn't change the
Okay.
subject line.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Let me ask you one more question.
Sure.
The fact that it has to go to a gubernatorial vote,
Mhm.
that is in the charter.
It is.
Can that be changed in some way, so it's a yearly thing?
At the next go. In
I
2026.
think that's every 2 years, it just
That's
takes too long
I
to
mean,
make
what does
a
it take
change.
to put an amendment in the charter or change something?
Well, this is the way it went on charter. There was a lot of discussion
A
about it.
lot of discussion.
A lot. And ultimately, we decided to go this way because it basically takes all the forward-facing stuff out of it, where people can say, oh, this guy got this passed or slipped by, or they
Okay.
called a special election just to get this slipped by, or whatever. It's the elbow rubbing, it takes all of that out of it and says, now the whole town knows. We've done our hearings, we've informed everybody, we've educated to the best of our ability, just like we have with this zoning ordinance. At the end of the day, when they walk through that door to vote, if they haven't educated themselves, it's their damn fault.
So the
because it's been
intention
2
was that it
years.
would be every 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Seems like a long time to wait to make a change.
It is, it's hard, and I mean, we did a great job on charter, I feel, but there were things that we went, ooh. But at the end of the day, I think past history has forced us to a spot where we thought that was best. So, it is what it is. I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Oh, I
Peggy,
want
thank you.
You're welcome.
to sit and chat longer.
I'll see if I can't walk us out again next time, guys.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
thanks
cool.
for
As
a
long
great
as
meeting.
The internet's working, she can remotely